Welcome back to another episode of Practice Underwater. This is a very, very exciting episode for me today. I have embraced Q&As for 2021, and we are taking that trend back to Practice Underwater. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, this year I'm going to be doing Q&As. And so Matt and I are doing today's episode as we are in the process of transitioning our coaching department to doing the interviews on Practice Underwater. Matt and I have been recording just me and him episodes, and we want to make sure that we're delivering of high value. And so one piece of feedback that we received was that the episodes that Matt and I have been doing, haven't been as relatable to the regular dentist who's listening to our show, who's, needs to take value from our show to make their practice better. And so, we're responding to that feedback by taking some commonly asked questions and discussing them on air today.
Sounds like a plan. Yeah, the transition to having the coaching department lead the Practice Underwater interviews took about a week longer than we anticipated, which is why it's us talking to you again today. We are committed. We will never miss a Friday. You saw we are on Christmas Day, January 1st, holiday, pandemic, terrorist attack, anything. You can count on us.
Back to Practice Underwater on Friday.
Like clockwork.
So Matt, what do you guys have for us? What did you polled some people, and we got some great questions today. So let's get started.
Yeah, I have a list of here. It's kind of tough to pick the first one. Okay. So this is a comment or a question you got from George's Dentaltown post where he's outlining his practice ownership journey for the last 2 years. So if you haven't seen that post, please navigate over to Dentaltown and take a look at it. It's going to be really great. So the first question from that was, what would you say to someone whose goal it is to remove him or herself clinically? What skills are required that might not be obvious, and what systems are necessary to cultivate in that practice?
Yeah, I love that question. When I read it, I was, oh man. Yeah, that was a great one. And I recently started a Dentaltown thread for anyone who didn't hear that. And this was one of the questions that was posted on there. Actually, I had Sean at Shared Practices set up dt.sharedpractices.com. We'll forward you to that thread so we don't have to keep forwarding that annoying link. But anyway, this question I thought was great because at first I'm like, oh, it's a relatively, straightforward process. And then as I started listing out the things that it takes to remove yourself from your practice, I actually realized that there was a lot more to it than I initially anticipated. And, I think the biggest thing is your leadership. Mm-hmm. I think as you grow, and whether this is from 6 employees to 12 employees, or whether it's 3 to 6 employees, it'll always put a strain on your leadership. And growing your leadership is what allows you to grow and begin to delegate, and more importantly, empower. And so I feel like the answer to this question is twofold. So one, it's what skills do you have to have internally, which is really, I think, leadership skills and ability to take risks and be uncomfortable and all that stuff. But then there's also the external component of that question where you have to now be able to empower somebody else to lead on your behalf. And I think that's the really big piece, is sort of building leaders within your practice. And whether that's, somebody empowering an office manager for the first time, or whether that's someone on the scale of, my practice, we have 2 dentists, we have 3 department leads, and one of those is an office manager. And so then you're empowering those leaders. But either way, I would think that the biggest skill set you'd need to obtain is leading leaders, and both having the internal leadership skills to do that as well as the external.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's definitely the place to start. I think from there more concretely is one way you could do it is just list off all the tasks that you perform at a dental office that, since you're not going to be there every day, you need to pass those off to a staff member, whether that be, supply ordering or dealing with lab, or, just make a giant list and then go kind of one by one as far as starting to delegate those tasks. Say you were getting ready to make this move. That's where I would day-to-day move things.
Oh, I love that. I love that answer. As such a more tactical answer where you start building a list of, like you had just said, right? Or payroll. And, so let's say someone comes late and then you have to have that conversation. So everything you do that's ownership function, begin writing it down. Mm-hmm. And then you're like, okay, I need to get someone else empowered and able to handle that task. And that's the more tangible way of how you actually build that leader, is you start empowering them to do those things on that list.
Yeah. And I think, that's where this switch is not overnight. You can't just go one day and hire an associate. You have to have months of planning for it, and kind of trying to poke holes of where you think your systems at the office are going to break. And you're not going to get all of them. I know I certainly didn't. But you'll get a lot of them, and you'll set yourself up to be in a much better position if you have this intentionality to it.
And so that's a good point, because I think a lot of times, we try to prepare for an event. And our hope or our expectation is that if I prepare enough before the event, then I'll prevent bad things from happening after that thing actually occurs. So like in this example, whoever posted that comment, they're wanting that transition to happen. And their hope is to prepare their entire practice so that they can then transition out of it. But the reality is that they can prepare as much as they want, and they should. But when that transition happens, there will always be things that get exposed that you didn't exactly prepare for, or maybe things that were dependent on you. Maybe potentially the case acceptance of the office was dependent on a dentist. Maybe it was, one of those things. And so being able to actually, come in with the expectation that things are going to break down and it's okay is also as important as anything else.
For sure. And like I said, I've had many parts of my systems be broken down in my, I'm in probably month 4 of going through this, and it's getting less and less by the day. Definitely early on, there was a bunch. And I think if you could do a theme from each of the breakdowns, it was not fully empowering that staff member, or like not passing off a task directly to someone that I should have. Is kind of where.
Can you give a couple examples?
Yeah, like my associate coming on very early on was asking a lot of like, hey, what would you do clinically situations? Like texting me a picture of an x-ray of a patient who's in the chair and expecting me to respond like instantly to her concern, or like ends up seeing one of my patients who's something went wrong and I'm not there, and then text me pictures. Well, I didn't fully empower her to, that I trust her clinical judgment to handle. And, it led to a lot of headache on my end of having to deal through that, but it's the onus is on me on why that happened.
Well, and I think the other point is you never actually worked with an associate at the office at the same time. So typically that's a step that a dentist will take in this transition, is they'll be working directly with an associate, where a lot of those questions and concerns will be ironed out in those times. So you're not getting text messages home. They're just coming into the office and sort of asking you a question on the computer. And then you'll sort of build your leadership skills and empower that dentist, and then help the next person that comes in to replace you. At least that's how it worked at my office with that one.
That would have made things a lot easier.
Yeah. And I think that's why I think the traditional, you kind of did an untraditional route, but I think the traditional route works very well because of that. So like your first step is you're a dentist, and then you're a dentist with an associate. And then if you want to, further exit your practice, then, but you've kind of gone through the steps. You sort of went from like step 1 to step 3.
And last point on this, shameless plug for our services, through our coaching department at Mastermind, this is where we really shine. That dentist who has the successful solo practice, or even, a middle of the road solo practice, getting to that point where you're moving yourself clinically is something we do very well. The leadership development through the Mastermind, dentist, and then the coaching department, staff empowerment and training through our former office managers, now coaches, to get the office ready for that. So something we handle really well. I really encourage you, if that's something you're looking for, please reach out. So next one, let's see. So so in doing the part of this is questions I received. Part of this was me looking at dental Facebook groups for questions, and a lot of the questions. So I searched leadership in a lot of these groups, and I would say 70% of the questions about leadership were what books to read.
Really?
Yeah, and I have some. I want to poke holes in that. I want to hear your thoughts of like the common way people think to grow leadership is through books.
Oh man.
Yeah.
You just opened up a can of worms if we're going to poke holes at things said on dental Facebook groups.
I just have a couple of these. This is one I really wanted to get to, though.
Okay, yeah. Let's. So, I think it kind of goes back to. I mean, do you want my thoughts on this subject, or?
Yes.
So I think this goes back to sort of what I was just saying earlier, where you have essentially, you have the preparation event, but then you have to actually do the thing, and then you have to troubleshoot all the things that go wrong. And books are a great way to prepare for challenges in leadership, but you actually have to go through the challenges of leadership and then that's how you actually grow as a leader, is those bumpy roads and those challenges and those staff issues and the drama and all the stuff that comes up. It gives you the opportunity to then sort of gain skills as you handle those things and keep going. So that's how I would say is that books are important because they teach you skills, but without actually practicing those skills, you're never actually going to grow as a leader. You're just going to grow in theory. So I think that's kind of what I don't think I'd want to say that like leadership books are not important, because I think we've both gotten a lot out of leadership books, but I think leadership books alone won't get you the result you're looking for. It's the leadership books and development plus the challenges.
And talk through a couple of the like concrete steps or areas where you've grown your personal leadership in your life. Oh
yeah. So I think so we're big on traction. I would say that that's the book that we most closely, both from a coaching department standpoint, we run off of EOS.
I have a traction question coming, so don't
Okay.
go too far.
Okay, I won't go too far, but traction is very important too. It's near and dear to our leadership and business operations hearts. And so you can read traction and it tells you a lot of things. And one of the things it tells you is, for example, for me, I have a hard time with getting out of things without meddling. And so, when I leave my practice, I come back there and I'll sort of meddle. And so, for example, if you are hiring an office manager and you are going to, have them handle certain things and remove yourself from certain operations like payroll and insurance management and staff management, when I did that process, I then meddled in it and I kind of overstepped her and I would go in and like handle certain situations. And that's one thing that they talk about in the book, but until you do it and then you see the negative effects of it and you go back and read the book and you're like, oh yeah, that's why this happens. And then you sort of develop and you become a little bit stronger and you learn to trust people. And so that's like I would say that's, I don't know. I'm not very good about talking about leadership tangibly. That's not my strong suit. So you're going to have to coach me.
Where I wanted you to go with it is like, talk about your life coaching, your EO, your all the things like you do on yourself to have people holding you accountable and training you in your leadership.
Yeah. So for me, I think that's one thing that people don't quite understand about me because I don't talk about it a whole lot is, I'm really big on leadership development as a whole. So I'm life development, life and leadership development coaching, right? And I do that. And then I'm an entrepreneurs organization and I do that. And then, obviously you read books as well. And so those are all like books is just one brand of growing your leadership development. But then there are like in-person events and coaching and stuff like that, like kind of like you were just talking about with our mastermind in the dental specific space. So for EO, I've learned a lot about from entrepreneur organization. I've learned a lot about the lifestyle of an entrepreneur. They make you shut your phone off all day when you go into an event. So it's 5 hours in the middle of the day that my phone has to be off. And then once it was like 8-hour day. And so that taught me to grow because I had to turn my phone off and it had me worrying. So I had to go back to my practice and make sure that they knew how to handle it if they couldn't reach me. And so it's just stuff like that, you just, by being in the right groups around the right people, you end up growing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely both sides of the coin, right? It's like being in it and dealing with the issues that come, which grows your leadership. It's reading the books, which is helpful resource, but it's also like, committing to other things to grow leadership too, whether that be EO or life coaching or some other mastermind or some other areas that have people who are maybe higher trained than you or know more than you are able to push you in these areas. They have higher expertise that you can really see that fast growth in your leadership. It's such a tough one, it's just such an intangible thing, but it
like,
pays dividends.
Going back to a solo dentist, for example, let's just say I have like one hygienist, 2 assistants, and 1 front office. That's like not a big leadership challenge. And I'm not saying that that's not, you can't be a great leader at that position, but I'm saying you're not being challenged a lot at that position. And so you might have more potential than you're currently exercising. The only way you find out is by growing. And then once you get the second hygienist, the second, front office, now you have 6 people. That's when that's a next transition of leadership. And so you might be through your books and preparation and like extracurricular activities, you might be a better leader than you realize. You just kind of have to grow into it. And there's always going to be those growing pains. But I really think that without doing it, you can't really grow past, you can't grow past your current level of the size of your practice.
For sure. Okay. That was great. So next one, we somewhat belittled leadership books a little bit. I want to like build them back up. So let's talk traction. So I think, we've been very vocal about this in the podcast that we use traction to run our company. I want to talk specifically dental
running our practice. Yeah. I think that's a great.
How do you implement traction to run your office?
Yeah. So I think that I think sometimes, when a dentist hears about like a business topic that's outside of dentistry, it's hard for them sometimes to connect the dots into dentistry. And so I hope that you continue to rein me back in where I'll talk about leadership and stuff. And then we talk about the specific office, but in Traction's case, so the way that we've implemented in my office, and I think that the one thing I want to add is traction is, I think it's like a gradient almost. Like you can integrate or you can implement some like kind of minor traction at first. I don't think you start like full traction day one. Yeah. I think you just start doing a monthly meeting with their format. And then you start doing department meetings and then you start doing quarterly meetings. So I think you can kind of ease your way into traction. It's a really hard thing to just roll out all at once. So I'm going to talk about that development in my practice where we started with traction and where we are now. So in traction, we the first time I read traction and started implementing in his office was when we did it for shared practices, which was like October of 19. And the first thing we did, we started monthly meetings with my whole office. And then we followed their meeting format, which is, you start with good news, and then you talk about your metrics, and then you'll address issues, you'll discuss them, you'll think of solutions and an action plan for the next meeting. And we started doing that monthly meetings in my office. And then I started the process of building what they call an integrator in Traction, like an office manager. So somebody that I'll say to do something and I can trust will get it done. And so that was like the first step of Traction in my office, was running monthly meetings using the IDS, identify, discuss, solve issues, language that's talked about in the book. And then that's like the level our coaching department, like that's where they'll start you, right? When you do that. And then at that point, and then they'll help you empower an office manager. So we empower an office manager. And then the next step in my practice was, then we did department meetings. So my team started getting bigger, and, then we have people working on different days. So we couldn't do a meeting every month with the entire team. So we started doing department meetings every month. And then we do a quarterly meeting with the entire team. So that was sort of the next step, where we have, so once a month, there will be an assistant meeting, a hygienist meeting, a front office meeting. So those 3 meetings happen weekly on Wednesdays during lunch. And those, they alternate.
Clarifying question. Is your office manager sitting in on all of those department meetings?
Correct. So we have my office manager in on every one of those department meetings. Those are from 12 to 1 every Wednesday. So, and then they'll bring me lunch, and I'll come in at 12:45, and then I'll sort of say like, hi, and then I'll eat, and they'll sort of brief me on takeaways.
And this, sorry to interrupt your flow here, but this is kind of, I think, an important point of like that office manager who is not doing any day-to-day office functions. Yes. So it can be confusing as like, all right, what are they doing? Well, here you go. Here's 2 hours of their day. They're not helping someone, collect money or do any insurance. They're literally there with your staff, planning and training.
Oh, I didn't even put that 2 and 2 together. So you're right, because as I started Traction, we had the monthly meetings. My office manager was still doing insurance coordination. So we had, at the time, we had a scheduling coordinator, a treatment coordinator, but we did not yet have an insurance coordinator. So my office manager was half office manager, half insurance coordinator. And then as our team started getting bigger, there was more people in our office, there was more HR. I started removing myself from the practice. She was needed in a more full-time capacity to handle a lot of these issues. So then we hired an insurance coordinator. And really, I mean, if you're wondering when to do that, you just look at your staff. This is a great use of staff overhead percentage. Is as I'm growing my team, if my staff overhead percentage is lower, then I can use infrastructure. I can create some infrastructure to make my life easier and kind of, increase my staff percentage a little bit. So like that's a great usage of staff overhead percentage, that metric that we always kind of rag on. But anyway, so we hired an insurance coordinator, and then that allowed my office manager to be fully freed up. So she does she's involved in day to day, but it's more like day to day in terms of someone comes late. She's dealing with that, vacation requests, managing all of our different employees. Like that's a full-time job.
Yeah, and that's what we're talking about, like gradient, right? Like you didn't start all that from the jump, full on Traction in everything they say. You kind of went stepwise, and that's really how we recommend rolling it out in your office before you get to George's level, where he has that full office manager who's not day to day at all and can now do all, sit in on all those meetings and run some of them. And other question, do you, so you visionary of your practice, integrator, office manager, do you two have any monthly touch points as far as Traction meetings?
So at this point, I'm in there every other week. And so the way it works is I walk in every other week at 12:45. I get briefed on the takeaways from the department meeting. So that's why I'm there for the last 15 minutes, because I just want to touch base with everyone, say hi, eat lunch while they give me their takeaways from the meeting. We kind of chat, then they leave. And then usually sometime in that afternoon for 1 or 2 hours, I'll get kind of the rundown from what's happening in the office, sort of the major things, input on major decisions. And I'll give her some, I think it's like we just talked about earlier, leading leaders. I'll usually coach her on like, hey, this employee, this is a great way of handling them. I would have this level of communication. And then, kind of coaching her through and keeping her. And then also she needs someone to vent to, because everyone vents to her. And so then, that's a two-way street, but mainly, she's sort of talking about the way things are going. And then, I'm there to support her. I'm a support for her, right? Support for her and also giving direction long-term to the practice.
So as you're reading this book, and they talk a lot about the visionary integrator relationship, the dentist, you are the visionary. And then it's about empowering, a front desk member, an office manager, or like a lead front desk type to be that integrator and grooming her or him. And then, Traction is very big on a twice a month meeting visionary integrator together. So once that person is more day to day with these meetings, you set up those where you two now have touch points and you are briefed on everything that they go over in those.
And then the one thing I'll add, so if you're wondering, if it seems abstract, I'm going to try to make it more tactical for you. So a visionary of a dental practice is essentially deciding what marketing are we going to do, who's hiring, firing, what are our future hours of operation, who's working when. Those are levels of, and then like, who is my team? Those are decisions that the visionary would make in a dental office. So like growth strategy, marketing, staff management, all of those things. And those decisions aren't super often, right? They can be every 2 weeks. And at this point, that's the level of involvement I have with my office still, is working as the visionary with my integrator. And I want to go back to the department meeting because I think I didn't fully wrap up that that thought. So the way we do the department meetings is the team lead, they will actually lead the meeting. So we have, for example, an assistant lead, a hygienist lead, and then my office manager will actually lead the front office department meeting, because she's kind of, she's front office lead plus office manager. We don't have a dedicated front office lead. That's not her. So they'll start and report. So every department has metrics that we track. So, dental assistants, we track a lot of metrics related to reappointing emergency patients, number of implants, that type of stuff. And then in hygiene, the hygiene metrics are the easiest, right? You have your reappointment rate, you have your fluoride, you have, the stuff that hygiene, and then you have for your front office, you have your case acceptance, your AR numbers, and those types of things we report by department. And so those are the metrics that we continue to track. My office manager knows what our targets are. And so she's fully capable and able to handle that meeting and ensure that we're hitting our numbers and we're doing all the things that we're supposed to do. And that's like the visionary's job. My job is to design what metrics per department. And then my office manager's job is to make sure that we're hitting those metrics. So that's how we do our weekly department meetings that happen every single month. And then, so weekly department meetings, but like they're monthly per department, but they happen on a almost weekly frequency.
Oh, so there's one of those meetings per week, but
exactly. So every Wednesday we have a different department. So it's like assistants one Wednesday, then hygienist, then front office, then we take a week off, and then we go back. So because there's usually 4 weeks in a month. So in the future, we'll probably add a doctor's meeting. If we have a larger team of doctors, then we'll add a doctor's meeting. So that's why we're leaving the space for the 4th. But that's how we run it. And then we do quarterly, a team-wide. So last quarter we took them to a restaurant and we had all day or a full afternoon where we did it quarterly.
Great. Okay.
This episode is brought to you by Swell. So all of us who are already using Swell know that it crushes reputation management. It's like turning on a steady stream of reviews that requires no effort from your team and just works. It's amazing. Additionally, it makes it easy to stay in touch with all of your patients before and after their visits. And it even has a great way to set up a virtual waiting room. But there's more good news. Swell has a brand new version of their platform. And on top of being simpler than ever to use, you can now actually get patients to pay via mobile, which is incredible. The reason that Swell is so effective at getting reviews is they make it easy. They've now brought that same ease of use to paying for dental treatment even after patients have left the office. Mobile payments are a great way to text them a reminder so they can pay at their convenience right on their phone. You can pay via credit or debit card, ACH, or even Apple Pay or Google Pay with just a few taps. No more phone calls, no more chasing people down with emails and letters that always seem to get lost. And it gets better. This new release includes Swell Schedule, which is an easy way for patients to request an appointment time that works for them, so you can lock down those appointments quicker. Listen, Swell is one of those things that you just need to try it out, turn it on, see the results, and then you're converted and you're like, well, I'm never going to shut this off. Listeners of the Shared Practices podcast can try Swell for free for 30 days. No commitment. Just set it up, see the results for yourself before you pay anything. To take advantage of this offer, head to swellcx.com/sharedpractices. That's swellcx.com/sharedpractices.
This next one, I want you to answer this based on, let's say, your first year of ownership. Okay, so not now.
Okay.
So how much time out of the practice do you spend thinking about the practice? Do you ever get to leave it at the door like you do as an associate?
No.
No.
No, you can't leave it at the door as if you're an associate.
Yes.
Not even close.
No.
So my first year of ownership, I would say, I love how you framed that question. That was great. So my first year of ownership, I think that was when I put the majority of my effort in the practice to grow it. And it was all the time. I mean, I don't think I was capable of turning it off. Like, when I'm driving around, if I was on like a 20, 30-minute drive somewhere, like for sure thinking about the practice, it was, almost an obsession, really,
And a lot of that's, your, the high goals you had, and a little bit about your personality, that you wanted rapid growth, and that took a lot of time initially for you to decide about all those strategies. I think for me, being someone who was less into it than you were, it was still a lot. Like, I think a lot of that time in the first year, we recommend getting into coaching to help you with that, and that takes up a lot of time. And usually as you buy a practice, there's a lot that you need to clean up, and you'll find out right away. Even if you bought a great practice, there's systems that are failing at every site, and it's really how quickly you want to change things and improve your situation. But it's definitely a significant time commit. Is not like being an associate, but you see the payoff. Like, look at George now. I mean, now it's a couple times a month he's in there, and even between that, not a ton of time is being spent thinking about the office.
Yeah, but I think that's the key there, is that initially there was a lot of time.
Yeah.
Right. And the whole point is, I think there's two ways of spending time growing your practice, and I'm putting quote unquotes. So I'm actually spending time focusing on doing things that will free me up in the future, or I'm focusing on doing things to maintain operations. Those are two very different things. And I find that a lot of dentists who work a lot on their practice, if you're submitting insurance claims, if you're submitting lab slips, if you're doing something repetitively, if you're doing a repeated function over and over again, that's not working on your office. That's working in your office.
That is such a key point that I really want people to understand. Like those, like you said, those ongoing tasks that can be delegated, doing those that's
not what I was doing. That's not what I was spending all my time doing. Right. It was the tasks that you work on delegating those. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what you're focusing on, because those are one-time things that will then free up your time. So
you're spending time there on creating the systems to delegate. Creating like for me, it was. And I think
systems is such a buzzword. I don't want to use the word system.
I know. Maybe if I give an example, it might help. Yeah. Like for me, it was sending out implant guides, which is kind of a lot of legwork. It's like, you got to get the CBCT scan and merge it with the intraoral and send it to the lab and write the slip and track when it needs to come back. Like, so I spent the time creating the system of how my assistant would know how to merge the files, to know how to write the lab slip and how to send it off and how to track when it comes back and time everything. So like, that's what I spent my time doing. I pass it off. And then there's some oversight in the beginning where they may not do it correctly, first or second time, but then it gets to a point where you don't need to think about it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what we want your time spent doing.
I like that. Let's use some tactical examples of where we see dentists struggle with this, and then we can offer them input on how to actually do it. So like, you did labs. I like that. So you kind of talked about like you're submitting a lot of lab cases for the more specialty work. That's very time consuming. So you essentially created a protocol detailing how to do that. And when you use, so this is a big, big point, the usage of third-party services for a fee to plan these cases for you to remove your time from planning.
Yeah.
So like an implant guide thing, like a simple implant on number 30, using one of those planning services that will design a very, very, and using one that you trust and that's reliable, so that all you have to do is look at the proposal, give your assistant a thumbs up, and then you're good to go. That's how you plan cases when you've delegated well. So this is the way it used to work when we used to do full arches. So I would kind of design the case as a full arch case, or this is how my associates do it now, but this is how I used to do it, where we're like, okay, I want 4 implants on top, 4 implants on bottom, upper, lower dentures. And then you say, we take these records, we send them to this lab. And then you have like a quick meeting with one of those services. They sort of show you the game plan, you sign off on it, then they send you the materials and you deliver the case. And, think about how much more efficient that is than if I'm going to learn how to, dink around in the software, and I'm going to spend all the time figuring out how to put all the implants in the right spot. Like, that's something you're going to have to do every single time you get a case. But if you create that infrastructure that allows the assistant to follow a protocol, then you're just essentially okaying and checking off on things. And that can be much more easily handed off to an associate so they can replicate those types of cases.
Yeah, I think people get stuck in a couple areas with that kind of stuff. It's like the cheapness that a lot of dentists have. Like, a lot of us are cheap.
Yeah.
myself included. And and you kind of trick yourself into thinking, no, I actually like doing that. And I had the same thought with implant guides of like, you can plan it all blue sky bio, and it's like quote unquote fun to do, but it probably takes you 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Is your time spent better focusing on the growth of the practice? Probably.
Well, and again, this goes back to the big caveat. Do you want to grow your practice? Mm-hmm. If you do, then you have to do the things we're listening to. If you're happy with the size of the practice you have and you don't want to grow it, then you don't need to free up any of your time to focus on growth so you can continue to design all your own implants. It just depends on what you want. Matt and I tend to be high growth people, so we'll typically do this. But, we're trading money for time. So we're paying someone some money so we can free up our time so we can focus on higher growth activities.
Right. All right. Well, let's get to another one here. So I have a couple of staff members who are described as C or B players. How do I support them to become A players? And at what point do I know that they might not have this jump in them?
Oh, man. Okay, I'm going to answer this question very honestly. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be potentially slightly controversial. Mm-hmm. If I'm a dentist and I have 3 employees, they all have to be A players. Mm-hmm. Right? That. So I only have 3 people on my team. So for me to like really do super fantastic, I'm really dependent on those like 3 people, right? So if I really want to do well, like the leadership of your team will take you far because you're very dependent on the people doing those things.
Well, I have an analogy for this. So say like, I was reading a Navy SEAL book, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, highly recommend. And in it, he talks about the Navy SEAL training boot camp mm-hmm. where they have to hold up a rowboat above their head and run across a beach. And imagine that task being done with 3 people versus being done with 8 people. Like when you have 3 people, they need to be strong people. Like they got to hold that thing up themselves. When it's 8, well, one of them could be a little weaker and the thing still functions well.
Oh, I love that analogy. That's super, right? So think about it. Let's go tangible to the dental office. Like patients answering the phone, verifying insurance, all of these things. A practice that's grown to a bigger size is going to have, protocols for how to do that. So we're not as reliant on A players at every position. We can have, B players everywhere. I don't like any C players, but we can have Bs everywhere. And then we have our select As in leadership roles. But if I'm in like a 3-op practice with 1 assistant and 1 front office, like those have got to be A players because they're doing like 6 different jobs, Yeah. And so you can't have those specialists and you can't train it. So you need better people that can handle that harder role. So I would say, so now to answer the question, so the quicker answer was you don't always need A players. Depends on their role. If they're a leadership position, they have to be an A player. If you're a smaller office with less staffs, you probably need more A players. But now a B and C is, why are they a B and C? Are they a B and C because they are potentially slower? They don't grow as fast. They're maybe stubborn. There's a reason why they're a C. Or is it just a lack of experience and they haven't done this role before, but they're likely going to get good at it over time? The person that it's because of them, it's kind of hard to change them. You can't. You can try to mentor them so that they grow, but if they're a C or B player because of their personality, if they cause a lot of drama, if they're like that toxic employee, who might be good at their job, but they're toxic, then that's not really a situation that's going to really remedy itself. But if they're one they have all the skills and they just need some, growth, then that's somebody that I would invest in. And that goes back to, so I'm going to answer that and then we can talk about how to actually do that. Do you have anything to add, Matt?
Well, I think the scenario I see a lot is with coaching clients would be you take over, you buy a practice, and it has a long-standing office manager who, let's say, is the only one at the front, mm-hmm. and you kind of perceive it as like, well, she's carrying the ship, right? Like she's the only one up front. She does a lot of different tasks, so she's really good at her job. But as we start to implement changes in the office through the coaching, we get a lot of resistance from that person. Oh, yeah. And, I think what I always come back to on whether that person has the ability to progress to an A or is stuck in that CB role is, are they coachable? Yeah. Like, are they going to take direction and feedback and implement it and not take it personally and like this isn't how the way we do it and that whole stubbornness stuff coming through? Like if that's not there and you can tell that usually pretty quick, move on from them earlier than you may want to.
Yeah, if you want to grow, right? I think this whole episode should be asterisks if you want to grow.
If you want to grow and if you want to like avoid frustration as the owner and as their boss, like that it's toxic and it takes a lot out of you.
I love that avoiding frustration. I remember this was something that I learned early in my career was avoiding having conversations with certain staff members costs you every single day.
I could tell you like the energy of an office, and I just had a client go through this. The next day that they're not there, that energy is palpable. Like
Yeah.
you can tell that something is different and this is a lot better, and it's because that person's not there. Like that's a real thing.
Yes. And it's so now the alternative. So let's just address their coachability, right? How do you actually do that? Is anytime you get resistance from a staff member about a change, you want to sort of address them. Why are you so resistant? You want to start seeing like what's underneath all this resistance. Like people aren't just resistant just to be resistant. Like they don't want to push back against their boss. So why are they doing that? And was it a negative experience? Is it a fear of something happening? And if somebody is capable of communicating their resistance to you, they're likely a lot more coachable than if they're like, it's just a bad idea. And, they just kind of stay in the world of just complaining about it. Your way as a leader to move past that is to say, okay, I hear that you are unhappy with blank, but how do I actually, can you help me explain where you're coming from or why you feel that way? Mm-hmm. And then if they can give you a coherent response that you can then address, and then if you can potentially get them on board with the idea, then that's someone who's coachable. If they either cannot communicate why there's an objective, or they cannot get on board with it, or they cannot be talked off of it, then that's somebody who's not coachable because they're just going to stay resistant. Ultimately, you're going to do the thing, whether they're there or not, is the only thing that's in question.
Yeah, as long as there's that open dialogue where both sides are being honest and saying how they really feel, like that can be worked through.
Yeah.
And, I think as a dentist, it's important to have oversight and keep them accountable in that early stages of a change that you can pick up on if, you wanted payments collected up front and you see that it's not happening, to going back to that staff member as soon as you see it and say, hey, like I noticed, so-and-so didn't pay for their crown fee, what's going on there? Is it, and then having that open dialogue be open and addressing any concerns that come from the other side.
Absolutely.
And like I said, if you do those steps, you'll know pretty quickly whether that person is willing to change for you or is just so stuck in their ways that, this just isn't the right fit.
So I'm going to give a common example that happens a lot to our clients. Mm-hmm. So naturally, we have a different philosophy on practice ownership. That's why we have growth that is very uncommon. And one of the things that we do a lot is we open up hygiene capacity. I think you would have, if you've listened to the show, you probably have heard that. And, one time I was opening up hygiene capacity with my front office and I was opening up Fridays. And she comes in there and she goes, I don't think we have enough patients to fill that day. Like, I'm very concerned about your plan here. I really, really don't like it. And I said, okay, help me understand your resistance. Like, what's the issue? And she goes, I think there's going to be openings. And I'm like, I do too. So what? And she was like, oh, that's okay. And I'm like, yeah, I'm budgeting for approximately, I think in this case, I budgeted for a third of the schedule to be open. And I was okay with that. And I go, do you trust me? So that's the first step, right? She communicated the resistance. Mm-hmm. We accepted what it was. It was that there was going to be openings. I then addressed that resistance by saying, I'm expecting and okay and comfortable with 1/3 of the schedule being open. And now the second question is, can you also get comfortable with that? Can that also be okay to you too? And, now we have a goal that we're going to fill 2/3 of the schedule. And so this is, I think, a very common one that our clients experience because we're doing the same move in a lot of practices with the same staff members with the same mindsets. So that's like a very common issue that we see all the time. And you just have to explore one level deeper and really see, okay, where's the resistance coming from? And then how can I appease your resistance? Because the reason why, so if you think of the most commonly, messed up systems in a dental office, it's usually the result of a dentist getting mad at a front office. Therefore, the front office weighing to the side of not upsetting their boss and doing this thing that probably isn't a good idea. So hygiene schedule being way too tight is in our entire industry, essentially, really favoring the dentists, their clients, whether it's the clients from a consulting company or the boss of an employee, right? Nobody wants hygiene openings. No dentist wants hygiene openings. So we all do this poor practice to appease them. If it's like pre-authorizations, right? Some dentist got a denied insurance claim and got all pissed off. So now every front office will submit a pre-auth for every single procedure ever so they can get the exact amount to collect. So they'll say it's not their fault. Yep. The pre-auth said, collect this. I collected this. Therefore, they're get out of jail free card. And so like a lot of the things that are broken in the way that dental offices or older staffs that you take over operate are usually the result of the older generation of dentists who would get very mad at their staff when things wouldn't go the way they wanted them to, whether it was a hygiene opening or like, paying your most expensive staff member to sit there and do nothing. No dentist liked that back in the day. And, an unpaid claim, all of these broken systems are usually the result of staff members just being afraid of. I mean, that's been my working assumption on why dental offices are run so unusually.
Yeah, or like an angry patient that their
Yes.
bill was higher than they thought.
Yeah.
So that, okay, now we're going to pre-auth everything so this situation doesn't happen again, and I don't have to sit in front of this angry person yelling at me. So I got a get out of jail free card because it's, I have it right here.
Oh, I love that one. So I'm going to add to that. So we have in our practice, we do fluoride, and so I had to tell my hygienist. So my hygienists were terrified that not terrified, but they were nervous that if the insurance verification work that we did said fluoride eligible, so they get free fluoride as an adult, that if they put that fluoride on them and tell the patient it's going to be free, then the patient might get a bill if the insurance denied it. And so I had to appease my hygienist and say that if the verification, so every time we get a fluoride denial, we check the verification. And if the verification said that fluoride was eligible, then we actually write that off and do not bill the patient as to not upset them, so that the hygienist will continue to feel comfortable telling the patient the fluoride will be free. Right. And we fix the error in our verification. So like that level of oversight and like addressing concerns never happens. And so what happens is the hygienist will tell the patient that fluoride is free. And then one time the patient's going to come in on their next visit and say, last time you said fluoride was free and I got a bill. And so then you're like, oh, well, I'm never telling a patient fluoride is free again because I got a bill last time and I can't trust the verification process. So it's essentially that, helping your staff work through their resistance to get things done that you want to get done.
Beautiful. Okay. Moving on to the next one. So how do you, and let's do your first year again on this one. Mm-hmm. How do you mentally handle the bad days?
Oh, yeah. So I think Matt and I actually recently had a debate about this where, best day as a practice owner, this is my feelings about this. Matt disagrees. I would say best day as a practice owner is the best possible day, as a practicing dentist over associateship 100 times. Worst day as a practice owner, I would argue, is worse than your worst day as an associate. And I guess we had that debate, but there's a lot of ups and downs, and the downs they're tough. And I think the advice that I could give, speaking from my experience, is early on, I made the down days, the bad things that happened, a reflection of me to myself. And so I would say, this patient got mad because they did not like me as a dentist. I am not good enough as a dentist. Therefore, this patient got upset. And the way that I've been able to handle the bad days is to remove myself one layer from the equation and say, I'm a good dentist. This patient was having a bad day. They took it out on my office. My office is a great office. This is where my office messed up. And we'll remedy that situation so we don't mess up again. But my office made a mistake. I didn't. I learned from it. I am not terrible because of it. I care enough. I think when you care, that's everything, because you'll care to fix the thing as you see it. Right.
And I think that really care. Like we're a segment of population that really puts a lot of ourselves in this profession and takes a lot personal with things.
A lot of pride in our, both for the work we do, and I think for me, actually, the hardest days of my practice ownership were not the business owner days. It was the clinical days. When my stuff failed, that was by far harder for me to manage than when my patient left a bad review. It was I would take a bad review over a failed implant every day of the week.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, that's like the clinical tough days. And like that still happens at an associate job. It's it's a little more muted. But that continues.
Yeah, but when you're an owner, it's a little bit more personal because they picked you and your practice, and like, I don't know why, but maybe I've never been an associate, so I don't know. But like, I feel like they picked me as their dentist, and they had freedom to go anywhere, and they trusted me, and I let them down. Like, that's how I feel when those things happen.
Yeah, and these bad days is kind of where I personally lean on support systems and allow myself to feel the emotions that are coming up, and try not to like do my normal thing of suppressing them, compartmentalizing, not focus on them, do something else. And like, okay, this is really upsetting to me. I'm gonna allow myself to feel it. I'm maybe gonna vent to my wife or something, and talk through them, acknowledge them, and then start to move on. And once you get that, get out of that like emotions are raging and you can't think straight and you're just pure reactionary, then you're able to like think about it, what actually happened. You're like, all right, this probably isn't that big a deal. There's definitely something to be learned from here. Maybe there's something I need to do differently next time to avoid this from happening again. But it's not that like end of the world like I initially felt when, I don't know, that patient called the office and they're upset that their $6,000 bridge is hurting or failed or something.
Well, and this is where support systems are very important. So I like what Matt said, because sometimes, well, most of the time, it's really, really hard to handle that bad day alone. You're just not in a mental state where you're able to give yourself the encouraging conversation that you likely need to hear. And that's where it's great to reach out to a neutral person who doesn't have any attachment to the situation, tell them what's going on, and then they'll help you work through it. And they'll say like, hey, this isn't about you. Like, you're a good dentist. You know that. You care. Like, that's the important thing. And they'll talk you through all those things so that you can then sort of feel better about it. And so whether it's like, a group of like dental school friends that you guys all communicate in a group chat where you guys get vulnerable and honest, whether it's, in Mastermind, we have these pods, so that they can do that type of stuff. But, develop a network of people where you can be vulnerable and honest and communicate the failures so that you can then be supported.
Yeah. Being a solo dentist as an owner it can be a lonely place, and those support systems are so needed.
Yeah.
It's especially from people who know what you're going through professionally wise, other dentists. It really helps you really understand the actual scope of what's happening, which is probably a lot less of a big deal than you may think.
Well, and this is where like solo pod versus group pod in our mastermind, like solo pod is much more social and active, those chats and everything, because they're all practicing by themselves, versus group pod, you walk into the office and you kind of vent with your associate, but solo practitioners, they don't have that associate or dentist that can relate to the situation. So they lean more on like solo pod, environment.
And this is why I noticed from a lot of people who are, and this is a common track, is like associate at a group practice going to be a solo owner. And actually, this was my track. Even though my office I was associate was very small, there was another dentist there most days, and that's where I had a lot of clinical communications. And dentists usually like that. They like having that person to fall back on. So when they come to this new practice that they're all excited for, but now that they're only dentists, that's a tough transition. And having those support systems is essential. Like George said, even if it's just group chat, dental school buddies, like something where you're able to take these concerns, because it can weigh on you and it can really get you down and make practice ownership harder than your associate job ever was.
Can I flip that on the positive side? So we just talked about for the bad days, what you can get, right? So I think that there's this concept in vulnerability that isn't always discussed. So there's like, EO, Entrepreneur Organization I talked about earlier, they have this concept of like, there's 100% of the things going on in your life. And there's like a really, really vulnerable 5%, like the worst 5% of things that are happening that are too hard to share because they're like bad, like something failed. I'm not going to go like publicize that on Dental Clinical Pearl so 40,000 people can see my failure. I kind of want to keep that close to the chest. So I'll trust like some small group of people. And then something so awesome happens in your life on the top 5% that like you can't share that publicly for other reasons. And so you also need a group. And so we've talked about the benefit of sharing that bottom 5%, but sharing the top 5%, having a group of people that you can trust where you share the top 5% is just as important, because you can learn from other people's victories. Like when you talk to dentists and you're like, hey, like, like think about it from your standpoint. If I'm a dentist and I have a network of 3 or 4 dentist friends, we all make about the same amount of money. We're not talking to our staff about how much we make, because they don't make as much as we do. So we don't share that. But within our circle, we all make roughly the same. We kind of help each other. And then now we can see how other people are spending their money, and then we can grow and spend our money in the same ways. Conversely, right? If you have a group of people like 3 or 4 entrepreneurial dentists who are running practices similar to yours, you guys have the same issues and you can learn from their good solutions that they're not sharing with everyone. And then you can grow as a result of it. So I think it's on both sides, that minus 5%, the worst 5% in your life, and the best 5% in other people's lives and your life. So I guess as I'm talking through it, I'm really realizing it's like the 5%, sharing that stuff, for support, it is that's what you get supported from other people. But then when other people share their vulnerable successes, then you grow as a result of it.
And I think this kind of is a great point. And I think it kind of leads into like when when people reach a certain income level that they had always said they wanted, and like I made it when I got there, and you get there and then you don't feel it, like you feel kind of the same. And I think that's because like there is no acknowledgement from some outside party or some support system that you did the thing that you always wanted and you made it there, and like that's freaking awesome. Like you need to go celebrate that. Like if you're just like holding that with yourself, well, yeah, it's gonna feel the same. Nothing's gonna change.
Yeah, like if you're an owner and like imagine, so like a very common situation for a dentist is that they dream of hitting 1 million. Like I want my practice to collect 1 million one year, and then they collect 1 million. If they don't celebrate that with anybody, what was the point? You know? So that's where it's nice to have like that group of friends that you can say, hey guys, I hit 1.02 million in collections, like high fives around. That's awesome. That feeling and celebrating it with your friends and community that you can like trust that stuff to, that's going to make you so much more likely to then keep going and hitting goals because you'll get the celebration, right? And that's where, you know, Matt has always pushed me to celebrate my wins and to do stuff. And so Matt and I share our wins with each other, and, you know, we celebrate them, and we're both happy for each other. And there's never a jealousy there. You need to find people that are never jealous of you.
Yeah. And that's not always so easy.
That's not easy at all.
Okay. I got one more that'll take us to the end here. So what would you say is the number one quality that an owner needs to be successful in practice ownership?
If you just listen to this episode, what do you think the answer is?
They're not going to answer you, so you probably should.
Yeah, right. It's your mindset, right? It's you know, you can give, and here's the, you know, you take like, I love this example because I remember I heard it once and I thought it was genius. So if you take associates and you know, you have two associates, one's producing, you know, a lot more than the other. If they switch offices, they will switch production within like 6 months.
Yeah.
And it's like, what changed? The mindset changed offices, not the systems, not the team, not the patients, nothing. And so it's the same thing with owners, right? With owners, you can take a successful owner of one practice and then you can put them in another office and then they can grow that office too. And it's not because of the practice, the patients, the circumstances. Like we always think it's because of like the way you verify insurance or like it's everything to do with the mindset of the owner. All of those things follow. And so, yeah, single most important concept or important skill to have is healthy ownership mindset.
Yeah. And I think if you've been to any of our past webinars or probably our future one, the next one, February, like you'll see that coming out throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
Like,
and this is a shout out to Alex Sharp. So when I did, so he's our director of Mastermind. When I did the who, what, how hierarchy that I talked about in the Mastermind, is kind of like start with who, your mindset, then you focus on what to do with analytics, and then you focus on the systems and how to do it. You know, that thing that we talk about at Shared Practices, initially it was what, how. And I presented it to Alex, and Alex like, you're missing who. You're missing like the most important piece. And shout out Alex, you know, it's who, what, how, and it's your mindset that becomes your ability to think about your practice, your ability to identify the right people to replace, have the courage to replace them, the right systems to do, you know, the right things to do and have the courage to do them. All of those things are your mindset and your plans and your desires for growth.
To bring it one level down, so mindset, definitely my answer as well. But if we're picking a word in mindset that I think is the most important, persistence. Like being able to get through whatever it is that comes your way.
Yes.
Continue venturing on through the fog, like to the end goal you want, is what's going to carry you the furthest in your career.
Yeah. And I think that's like grit, right? Isn't there that book by Angela, whatever, that talks about, sorry, Angela, whatever, but like, yeah, something like that. So grit is that book where it talks about that same concept where, you know, it's the people that are the most successful in life are the ones that were able to sort of like deal with challenges and keep going and refine and adjust. It's not just persistence, like don't do the same thing over and over again, right? It's the persistence plus, you know, doing something different, I think.
Yeah. Well, being persistent will allow you to figure out what those things are.
Totally.
You'll get the what's if you're persistent. You'll hire the coaching. You'll do the research. You'll try the thing.
Yeah. Like, try anything until you get it. Yes.
Get it.
Yeah. I'd say the willingness to do anything to accomplish your goals. Like totally. Yes. Yeah. I love that.
Great. That's a good button to put on this.
Yeah, let's give us some feedback, guys. So Matt and I are going to do solo episodes. We're going to do intro outros. You know, so when it's just him and I, you know, is this the type of content you guys want to hear? You know, and submit stuff to us, you know, so that we can diversify our content and really cater to the things you guys are looking for. So if you guys enjoyed this episode, this was our best guess at what would be the highest value. And so if there was something that you wanted more of or less of, just let us know, and we'll make sure to cater our content to the things that you guys want.
And a good mechanism to let us know, email me, Matt at Shared Practices. It's more likely to get a response than George.
Wow. You are inviting an email from the audience. That is big.
I feel like I've done that a decent amount. Yeah. I love getting emails.
Okay. So Matt loves getting emails. Go ahead and send them. See you guys.